Welcome to the Firebelly Social Show. We're focused on talking to food and beverage brands that are on a mission to make the world better.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another edition of the Firebelly Social Show, where we chat with founders and leaders of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And it's something that we're so passionate about. We love, Arnell and I love doing this and connecting with awesome leaders. And so speaking of Arnell, she's here with me. What's up, Arnell?
Hey, Duncan, what's up? And thanks, everyone, for tuning in to this latest episode of the Firebelly Social Show. We have a great show lined up for you today, talking with Lisa Lee, founder of The Chi. This episode is brought to you by Firebelly Marketing. At Firebelly, we help mission-based food and beverage brands bring people closer through social media marketing. So if you're ready to use social media to create more community and excitement around your food and beverage brand, then go to firebellymarketing.com to learn more.
You guys, I'm so excited about today's show because we have the inimitable Lisa Lee here today. She is a monk's daughter, Qigong teacher, and the founder of The Chi. And The Chi is the first and only brand in the US to specialize in single origin superflowers for tea and culinary. And she's been featured in Martha Stewart, The Thrill List, Food and Wine, and so much more. So Lisa, a very warm welcome to you.
Hi, Duncan. Hi, Arnell. Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
We are very excited to have you. And Arnell, I know you are rearing to get going. So why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So we would just love to know, where did the idea of The Chi come from? How did you get started?
Yeah, great question. So long story short, but I worked in fashion for over 10 years and I was really burned out. I started out in marketing, then I did sales, and then I had the itch knowing always wanted to go back to school for design. And then after going back to school, I had 2 fashion knitwear accessory brands because I was really obsessed with sustainable fashion at the moment, and I was just burned out. And before then, I grew up in Asia, so tea was in my blood. I also grew up as a single mom, and when she was working, I would have tea with my grandma. And that was always something really, really special for me as a child. And just remembering how joyful and nourishing tea is from my childhood personal experience. And when I moved to the US when I was 14, it was literally the first time I have ever seen tea bags in my life, because at the time when I was growing up, that wasn't a thing we had ever consumed. So it was just such a culture shock moment, if you will. But, life went on and I didn't really think too much of it until I was really burned out. Thinking back, I wanted to, tell a new story about how dynamic tea can be, which I think lots of people are familiar, how wine is so dynamic. It has such a range, whether that's from price point or quality or region. Tea is that way as well, but I felt like at the time when I was thinking about it, tea was mostly considered as a weird third cousin to the coffee here. But I think it's changing. More and more people are realizing how incredibly benefit, in addition to the range of taste tea can be. So that was how I started. And there was a little funny story about how we started in a flower tea versus a more traditional caffeinated tea, if you will. But that was the gist of the story.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Go ahead, Duncan. Looks like you wanted to mention.
I was going to say, I think we see this again and again when we talk to founders, Lisa, where they have identified like an unmet need and they respond to it. And that's what makes you so amazing, is that you were able to draw on your experience connecting with your grandmother at such an intimate level, and the transformative power of tea, and you came back to it. So that's really amazing. Tell us about the whole connection to the flower. I mean, I know you one of your taglines is "In flowers we trust." We're dying to know.
Yeah, I'll just touch up on a little bit about caffeinated tea, because it was a moment of like vicious cycle, if you will. I felt like a lot of people didn't know good tea or didn't have access to good tea. And nobody really talked about good tea. It's like one of those things, if you know, you know. If you know this, for example, this gem of a cafe existed, if you know, but if you didn't, like you wouldn't know about it. So that's how I felt about tea in general. And then I went on a trip with my mom to Shangri-La, Yunnan. It's a real place. You can look it up, but it's a really remote village that is the southwestern part of China. It's actually where tea originated. It's the origin place, a birthplace of tea. And they have these tea trees that are 1,000-year-olds. If you see modern tea plants or gardens, they're tea bush, it's maybe like 10 years old or things like that. But they have trees that the locals think of them as like tea gods. They like protect them. And people go visit and make wishes and things like that. So that's where I went. And when I went there, the first day, I came across this lady who had a little tea shop. And it was May. It was actually the season of rose harvest. And she served me this. It's actually what I'm drinking today. I don't know if you can see, but wow. Yeah. So she served me this beautiful whole flower rose as a tea. I've never, ever had anything like it. And I felt like I was drinking tea my whole life. I knew all my greens, my black teas, my oolong, like all these other more traditional caffeinated tea. But the way that whole experience was for me, it changed my whole journey of a pivot, if you want to call it that, to launching a whole flower tea versus something that was more traditionally caffeinated, like a pu'er tea, which is why I went to Yunnan. It's the home of pu'er tea. It's like champagne. True champagne can only come from the Champagne region. Pu'er tea can only come pu'er because they have these like big leaf trees.
Very cool. I think it's a couple of things you said are resonate with so much because I'm a big tea drinker. And, living in America, growing up in America, used to the tea bags. And then I get into, free leaf types of teas and going into like coffee shops. A lot of them, they just flat out don't serve tea or they serve only a very basic form. So it seems like a challenge to, in the American market, in the U.S. market where you're selling it in now, how has educating people on the benefits of tea, how has that been? And what's your experience?
Man, that's the question we talk about every day. Yeah, no, it's definitely a question to answer. So the way I think about it is that, and it's something we're still figuring out ourselves. So it's like, how do we marry the health benefit with a beautiful experience? And it's funny because I was literally talking to our team and figuring out our content. And we did a survey recently, and people wanted to learn more about the health benefits of our flower teas. I think for a long time, I felt like people would be more into them because how beautiful they are and then it's the health benefit, right? Because it's like so lovely. But we're discovering and learning people really care about the health benefit, maybe even more than how beautiful they are. So we're definitely figuring out how do we share more about the benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Arnell always gets to the deep questions, Lisa.
Love it.
I can't help it. I'm just a deep person.
What do you think? I have the same question for you. What have you seen in terms of how to dissect, sharing education or information or benefits work?
Great question. Did you want to answer, Duncan? Or you?
I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I don't know that I can answer that directly. I'll say that I find, having grown up in India where, tea is an essential part of the social fabric of life, right? It's like, doesn't matter if it's 110 degrees, let's get a hot cup of tea, right? And so it's a very social thing. But I think like somewhere along the way in India, like the health benefits of tea got lost. And so even though India produces some of, the best tea anywhere, like people ruin it with sugar and milk. Now, understand the value of chai and drinking tea, but Like there's so many esoteric white teas and yellow teas and purple teas that have so many benefits. I don't know. I think America is a very dominant culture. And so I feel like coffee is the dominant drink of choice. And then you have this whole subculture. It's really not a subculture, I guess. The dominant culture of fizzy cola drinks that have caffeine in them. And so I feel like tea is sort of like this elegant, amazing truth that people they think it's boring.
Yeah. Ooh. You think people think because tea is boring here in America?
I think,
I think that it's something that, again, going back to that educational aspect, that it just needs to be for people to educate on what it is. And so people love wine, to your point. People love wine. They love champagne. And when me and Duncan, we're talking to a lot of founders here on the podcast. And one of the things we're learning is people love functionality in their beverages. So when you talk about the health and wellness aspects of it, that definitely aligns. And then people are also getting more into, this is kind of a different aspect of health and wellness, but like the zero proof alcohol. And people are really much more interested in having complex drinks and beverages that they can enjoy that's not alcohol. And so I really think that what you're doing can align really nicely with that crowd who's really looking for sophistication, for beauty, and for experience out of their beverages that doesn't have anything to do with alcohol. So I think that that's something you guys can definitely own.
I mean, and it does seem like there is a ritual aspect to tea. I mean, I'm sure there's rituals to anything you do, but there is a ritual aspect to tea. And that, I don't know, it seems like a purer drink. Like you can, if you're not drinking caffeinated tea, you can drink 20 cups of tea and you're fine. You're not going to get sick or over caffeinated or delirious or anything, and you can't drink 20 cups of coffee. So,
Right.
I don't know. I guess it's interesting, right? Because I live in the Midwest. Arnell lives in California, and tea consumption is definitely, I feel like, from my very uneducated perspective, on the rise. There's no question about it. And people seem much more open-minded. I feel like Generation Alpha, my son's Generation Alpha, right? So super young kids are like, oh, what's tea? Why do people prefer tea? And Generation Z seems much more likely to drink tea than a boomer or an Xer.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're totally right. And I wouldn't say you are, I would say you're more educated about tea than most people, just by growing up in India. No, truly, I think for anyone who comes from, a family or culture where tea is more predominantly popular, you just automatically have a more understanding.
It's such a social glue, right? It's like you. The moment you arrive in someone's house in India, it's like, will you have some tea? and you're and tea bags, man. Tea bags are looked down upon. It's like if you show up with the tea bag, you're going to get some serious doubt. It's like what?
Oh my God! Don't even get me started. So the same trip I was telling you earlier that I went on about, discovering the rose tea, and I visited many of the shops. And at that point, I was so used to tea bags here in the US. I was like, oh, do you guys make tea bags? They basically gave me the dirtiest looks, like, what is wrong with you? Like, I had 3 heads on my shoulder or something. It's basically the worst, lowest quality tea you can imagine. That's what they put in tea bags. Because again, remember, I went to Yunnan. It's like the birthplace of like pu'er tea. And they have these like beautiful, if you can imagine, like, I don't know what's a good vintage of wine that will cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is a region where they have that kind of tea. They have these aged pu'er tea. So pu'er tea can come in 2 forms. One is called fermented. One is raw. So the fermented ones, if it's an old vintage that's been around, I don't know, 20 years or whatever, and it's from a legacy mountain. So they have 6 legacy mountains, and the legacy mountains are the same mountains that used to produce these tea for tributes to the royal family. So they've been around for a really, really long time. So if they come from these places, they demand a price point of tens of thousands of dollars for they call it tea cakes or pour cakes. They're like these round things, and they are like the most incredible teas you can ever try. So I'm asking these people if they make tea bags. So that's the type of, it's basically maybe going to a chateau that makes a really beautiful vintage, asking them, do you sell box of wine, like a blend or something? They would just basically shoot you out.
Yeah.
And it's the other thing that I think is fascinating is the fact that you all emphasize community so much, because it does seem like it's not just the right thing to do, but it also seems like smart business. It's like community is smart business.
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know how good of a job we're doing with community. We try, and I don't know if we cracked the code yet. We're a super small team, but community is really important. How have you seen that it's been helpful in terms of building community for other brands, or from your own perspective as well?
So I think that not every brand deserves a community, and not every brand can earn a community. Maybe that's a better way to say it. I think that, is there a community around, the IRS? Sure, there is, but they're not really interested in each other. They're just interested in like, how can they pay their taxes and how can they pay the least taxes maybe. But, I remember knowing years ago, I forget the name of the brand. There's a scissors brand, they have the orange handles. And
Yeah.
the name is escaping me. And there's a huge community around those scissors, and I think they're Northern European. And it's because they're used by crafters, like people that are into crafting use those scissors because they're easy to hold. And so they were trying to understand, like the brand was trying to understand, like there's a friend of mine, Gino Church, is to work on it. And it's all word of mouth, And so I think that when brands are doing a good job with their content and people are talking to each other and there's a shared vision and some shared values, then you have the basis of community. Also, Lisa, by the way, we never get to talk about this stuff on here because we always make it about our guests, but thank you for asking that. So I think that if there's no shared vision and if there's no shared values, there's no community. We used to work on this brand years ago. It's a little tiny Cajun restaurant chain here in the Midwest. And I used to run the social at the time, and I'd ask the dumbest but most inflammatory questions. What if the notorious B&B, which is one of their dishes, got into an argument, with red beans and rice? And there'd be 200 answers, like who would win and how would the fight go? And it was because everyone loved the food, and the founder is this crazy Cajun lovable guy. And so people would talk about it. And it's like, you know what? The day after everybody was on fire, the restaurants would all be busy. So is there a causal relationship between community and commerce? We can't prove it, but you can see it.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. And that's such a good question to ask, and an amazing name to a dish they have on the menu. So clearly they know what they're doing and they have a good sense of humor about it. Yeah, I don't know if you can prove it, but I think you can definitely feel it, right? If you have a strong community. And I think you probably can prove it at some point, like maybe it's a longer game because building communities might take longer than just running some paid ads. But I think ultimately that is what's sustainable in building any kind of business. You have to have people who really care about what you are offering in terms of products and services.
That was like a deep statement. I'm going to say it again. Maybe you can't prove community, but man, you can feel it. That's a quote right there. That is such a good quote because you can feel it. And especially if it's a community that's supportive, and is again based on value, on shared values. So,
and it seems like you guys have a community around wellness, and at least a focus on wellness, which can be a great opportunity to create community. And I know you collaborate with some wellness hotels. So tell us a little bit about that wellness focus and how you're connecting to people in a wellness space.
Yeah, it's a really good question. Because our product is quite unique and it kind of it can fit in a lot of different categories or industries, if you will. Wellness is definitely something that's very fundamental to us. Like I think of our brand as a wellness brand before it is a tea brand, if you will. We have partnered with some, like for example, there's a resort in LA. They offer our flowers in rooms for their guests. So it's like, how do we create, a holistic experience? Or maybe another way is like, we really care about the different experiences people have in life, and how does our product fit into their existing experiences to enhance it? So like resorts, wellness places and retreats and all of those places where you're there, that's very intentional. Like you're there to have the intention to be present, to be well, and to take care of yourself. Those are the places we would like to be a part of it as well.
I think that's awesome. And there's so much opportunity to grow, I think, here in the US, because I don't want to say wellness is a trend. I wouldn't necessarily say a trend, but I would say that the traditional American culture is traditionally not about wellness.
Oh, so true. No, you are on the point.
Yeah. And so, when you're thinking about growing your community and connecting with people and having the right message, thinking about, where are the different places that people are embracing wellness, I just think that there's so much growth opportunity for you here where you can tap into these markets.
Absolutely. Any tips?
Arnell, she is so good at turning it back on that. I love it. And it's interesting because it seems like, to our inexperience with your company, looking at it from the inside, looking at it from the outside, it seems like core of the business are the flowers, and the flowers seem to have like extension opportunities, like edible flowers. And I saw on your social, you guys have done some cool things with candles and with food, and it just seems like that is a category that is, I don't even know if it's a category, right? Because the only place
Yeah, it's a new category. It's a new category. So there's great point. Sorry to interjecting this, but basically you have the traditional edible flower category, and lots of times they're fresh, from the farm, and if they have produce, and sometimes they'll grow edible flowers and people use them as garnish at fancy restaurants. And then you have the tea category, right? And the tea category is huge. You have your traditional teas that are black tea, green tea, and caffeinated tea. And then you also have herbal tea, which people put it under tea, but technically herbal teas are not real teas. They're anything you infuse and brew that is not a tea, a true tea. And true tea only refers to the leaves that comes from this one plant called Camellia sinensis. Anything that's not from this plant, it's not a true tea. They fall under the category of herbal, or this French word tisane. And then under herbal or tisane, you have everything, basically, whether it's a dried fruit or ginger or root or pieces of flower, it's like a subcategory. And we are specializing in this super flower, if you will, which is a edible flower that's also a super herb. And
That's fascinating. And so it's interesting, right? I guess, as what are the struggles? I mean, obviously education is one we've been talking about. What are some of the other struggles that you face, or ones that you've conquered way?
Yeah, and apologies for the noise. I'm in New York City, so you're going to hear quite a bit of siren, but hopefully not too much. That's a great question. Honestly, if you asked me this question 3 years ago, I would have been like, Duncan, oh my God, the struggles are real. But now, honestly, I think of them as opportunities, right? Like they are, even though it's a newer category, so you can say education is a struggle, but it's actually content. And I get so much content around education. Lots of people are like, oh my gosh, I don't know what content to create. But for us, it was like, we have endless amount of questions from our community that we can create content around. A lot of it is benefits, education on tea, education on how to use the flowers. So it's just a huge opportunity. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, how that, Gen Z or even Alpha, like they are of different generations, or they're really open-minded, right? They want to learn and they're curious about different things versus maybe older generations. They are perhaps more set in their way. But funny story, because those people should care about their health more. They care about their well-being way more than the younger folks. But those are the people maybe are slower in terms of opening up to something different, something new. And it is changing, right? It's like the more you are older, you might come across more health-related issues as people getting older. And you might go to traditional hospitals and go through that whole system. And you might come across things that, there are only a couple things they can do. I don't mean to downplay Western medicine, but in a sense, like Western medicine is amazing for accidents. If you broke your leg, please go to the hospital. They'll fix you up. Don't go to a traditional Eastern medicine doctor. You do that after you get fixed up at the hospital. They're just very different ways of thinking. So like if you're older, you're sick about something, what do? They give you, the treatments are surgery or medication, like pharmaceutical drugs, right? That's really about it. Like, I don't know what else they have in their toolbox to fix you. And those things doesn't necessarily, especially the pharmaceutical drugs, you are on a prescription lots of times for a really long time, if not for the rest of your life. It's like putting a Band-Aid over something. They don't look at the root cause of your problem or your illness. They don't think about how do I cure you, because maybe there's no money, right? If the pharmaceutical companies cured you, how do they make money? But Eastern medicine is about how can I cure you? So there's a traditional or just old saying, a good doctor is a doctor that you don't go back again because they have cured you. But that's a very different way of looking at well-being.
Although I think to me, it's a very appealing way to look at it. I'm trying to think of why my memory is not great today, but I'm reading this book about how instead of catching the balls when they fall on you, go to the top of the building and get rid of the person that's throwing the balls on you.
Totally,
you're right.
It's interesting because that also requires work and change and still commitment. It's like, I'm going to not overeat, or I'm going to work out, or I'm going to meditate, or I'm going to, drink something that has healing qualities as opposed to drinking something that's going to kill my taste buds with artificial flavors. So.
Yeah, totally. It's exactly like what you said, it's how to prevent. Right? It's like the whole Eastern philosophy is about preventative care. And what does that mean, right? Because I think Western has that term too, preventative care. But from an Eastern perspective, it's literally doing all the things that bring you joy naturally, right? Eating plants from earth, like just whole foods from, I don't mean the brand Whole Foods, but like whole like vegetables, whole produce, right? And lots of times I think the Western perspective is like elimination diet. Oh, like I'm allergic to like 10 different things on a list, which I feel so bad about. So many people are allergic to different things, but it's because your system is really imbalanced. Like your organs are not balanced, and it's like, girl or boy, you gotta like figure out what is going on a larger level versus just cutting out a certain type of thing, and do that until you can like heal your body so it doesn't have those allergies anymore. Like it can happen.
So the book I was mentioning is Outlive, and it's by Peter Attia. And it's a fascinating book, but he talks so much about the value of Eastern thinking. And yeah, so, and this is a strange question. Do you consider your company or the product, is it a luxury product, or is it a I mean, I guess it depends on your mindset too, right? Because
it depends on the customer. I think it's a necessity because, I mean, what's more important than your well-being, your health and well-being and happiness? Like, that is it. That's literally it. How happy are you? How healthy you are? Without those two, like, what else is there? What else can you do? So I think it's absolutely a necessity, but I don't know if everyone feels that way.
It's interesting because maybe some of us think, or we've been conditioned to think, that if it's beautiful, it must be a luxury. To think that, beautiful things and small things, like doing small things for yourself, can be so transformative.
Yeah, I think so. I think I can, like, if you want to think of it as like a little treat, like a daily treat for yourself, right? Or indulgence, if you want to call it that. But it's only good for you. It doesn't have any of the bad stuff. Because sometimes I think when people think of like an indulgent, they think maybe, I don't know, like a sugary cheesecake or something. You're indulging in something, but it's not that great for you. But this is something you can indulge in and feel really good about.
What's interesting is it occurred to me while we were talking that the switch that you've made from fashion to tea, where you worked on essentially the things that people put on their body, and now your world is set on things that people put in their body.
Yeah, so true. Haven't thought of it that way, but yeah, that's funny.
Arnell, it's your turn.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful to chat with you and just learning more about the tea. And also, just going back to that, the saying of, food is medicine. And, what we're putting into our body is healing us. It's, affects us, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And so I think that that's so cool that you guys are focused on that. What would you say is maybe some of your best business decisions that you've made so far? Since you've come here, you've started everything, you've experienced some challenges. What do you feel like are, like, hands down the best things?
That's a really good question. I feel like I don't think of it that way. Let me think real quick. What are the best things? I think starting the company is probably one of the best decisions I've ever made, even though sometimes I'm like, this is not easy. But I think, yeah, just starting it and keep going, right? It's like a choice we all make day in and day out. Do I want to keep doing this? And how much longer do I want to keep doing this? And every time I ask myself this question, I was like, I can't think of anything else I want to do. Like, this is what I want to do. I keep doing this, and I want to make people learn more, like understand this is an alternative or option they can try. I think there are so many like things when it comes to whether it's like hydration. People don't like drinking water, right? Like, there's no taste to it. You can drink a flower. It has no calories. It has like antioxidants, and it's really beautiful too. So they're just like so good for people. I just want people to learn more about them and appreciate them and know that, you have options. And I think sometimes when we think of like being well, it's such a chore, right? It's like work. It's actual work, and it's hard things I have to do. But I want to share a perspective where being well can be joyful and can be happy. And it's not something you have to do, but it's something you want to do because it makes you so happy and makes you so well. Like, why not live that way?
Yeah.
Especially when you have the choice. It's like, living. I mean, most people, I don't want to say this in a blanket way, but most people do have the choice. I mean, no question that eating healthy is more expensive. But, there's so many, you do have the choice. I mean, for most of us, the choice does exist to make good choices when it comes to what we put in our body. I mean, if nothing else, we can choose to not put bad shit in our body. So, so I mean, I think it's a fascinating question. What are some of your favorite teas to drink?
Yeah, I drink very little caffeine. So sometimes I'll drink a matcha or green tea or pork tea. That's like the extent of caffeine I have. But other times it's all herbal. Sometimes flowers, all flowers. Sometimes I like ginger. It kind of just depends on what's happening in my body, how I feel. And I will supplement the particular herb or tea based on what I need in my life.
I love that. I love a good herbal tea myself. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
Remind me a lot of another guest that we had on the podcast, Sierra Thomas, founder of Pink Cloud Beverages. She does functional beverages, like a alcohol replacement, but it's just a functional beverage. Makes you feel good, and she's all about, wellness and living your best life and living more in the moment, which reminds me a lot of what you have going on. So it was just super cool to connect with the both of you.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because the other thing that Sierra said that reminds me of Lisa is that we're not trying to convert everybody to tea all the time. We're trying to get people to try it, right? It's like she talks about people being sober curious, where people who drink a lot are curious about being sober because they don't know any different. Like drinking is such a culture, and so they're considering sobriety, and they're curious about it. And I feel like that's what I run into. I'm a big fan of tea. I always got a new tea I'm trying, and to me, it's like, hey, I ask people all the time, like, do you drink tea? Because I'm wanting to send them some, and the answer is usually sometimes.
Yeah, it's true. I feel like, there are definitely more and more people, maybe they'll drink a coffee in the morning and they'll have tea in the afternoon, right? So it's not this extremists, I only drink this versus this, but people are more open to, let me try everything and see what I like, which is such a more fun way to live. Just try different things. You don't know what you like or what you don't like until you try everything versus just being have this preconceived notion of, I don't like this. And, also don't give up so quickly, right? Because you can have a bad piece of sushi from a bad restaurant. It does not mean every piece of sushi or all the sushi restaurants are bad. If that's how you determined it, it ruins the whole category, but it's just not true, right? So if you have a bad something one time, maybe try something from somebody else, because the ingredients or quality and everything can be different.
I also think that the majority of grocery stores stock really bad tea. Like the tea that you find shelves when you buy the little boxes and it's got 10.
Yeah.
And it's like, man, I don't even think that there is the teeniest bit of tea in there. It's like there isn't, you need enough, whatever it is, whatever kind of tea it is. It's like you need enough of it to actually give you some flavor, and then people don't realize that the water is going to be a certain temperature too, which I know Arnell was wanting to ask about steeping, and your thoughts on steeping.
Yeah, quick comment about your tea bag comment about the supermarket. So if you think about it, right, in a way, the tea bags that only cost $4 or $5 a box for, 20 or 30 tea bags, they're literally of the lowest quality and what people call tea dust. I mean, it's just common sense, right? If something is costing you pennies, what do you think they're putting in there, right? How can something logically cost so cheap and being high quality? It doesn't make any sense. So that's that. And I always compare it to kind of like the hot dogs of tea. It's like tea bags or like hot dogs. You don't even know what's inside. And there's an article by BBC a little while ago. They did a study on how much microplastic there is in tea bags. Basically, what you're drinking is the microplastics, the glues, and all the other stuff you don't even know what you're consuming. Because they're all coming from these huge tea plants that use a lot of machines that chop up. It's very industrialized process to making tea bags. Okay, so back to your question, steeping time. It depends what kind of tea you'll have. And if you have a kettle that has like a precise temperature, then you can dial that to the very precise exact temperature depending on the type of tea you have. So for example, if it's something like a green tea, you don't like true teas, right? And that's your green tea, black tea, oolong. You don't steep for a really, really long time. And it also depends on the quality of the tea you have, because true teas, the caffeinated tea, the leaf ones can get bitter if you oversteep it. Versus herbal or flowers, they're a lot more forgiving because a lot of times they're just herbs or edible flowers or even fruits. Sometimes they can, depending on the ingredient, it can get bitter, but generally speaking, you can steep it or cook with it. It's why people use it in other like rose ice cream, like Duncan was saying earlier, right? Like you can use them in different ways. So it's way more forgiving. I'm just saying generally when it comes to herbal, so you don't have to worry about the steeping time as much. Our flowers are a little fussy in terms of time, and they like being steeped at least 3 to 5 minutes. Like it's the much longer steep comparing to tea bags. Yeah.
I must be a flower because I feel like that's a good word to describe me as fussy. So I am fussy. Arnell, is that accurate?
Every once in a while, I wish we all get the day.
That has been such a great conversation. Before we wrap up, is there anything else that you feel like you want to say out there to all the people that are listening?
I don't know, be happy, be easy about it, because life sometimes can be hard and it's way too serious than it needs to be. Be mindful of what you're consuming, not just food and beverage, but like social media, TV shows, or news in particular. Just be mindful, like in terms of what makes you happy, right? Like, and I don't mean happy, like, I don't know, drinking 5 bottles of alcohol, like that kind of happy, but just like wholesome happiness, like go take a walk in the park or go hiking if that's your thing, like nature, like healing, nourishing nature things that are a lot of times free, like, that doesn't cost anything, or go to the beach, play with animals, like just live it a little bit more joyfully and wholesomely.
So awesome. Can you tell us where people can find you?
Yeah.
Where can we buy your tea?
Absolutely. You can find us online, and that is the-qi.com. So it's the-qi.com. And that's our website. You can find us on social under Drink the Chi. And yeah.
That's really great. Thank you so much. Arnell, you want to take us out on a message?
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for tuning in to this latest episode of the Firebelly Social Show. At Firebelly, we help mission-based food and beverage brands bring people closer through social media marketing. So if you're ready to use social media to create more community and excitement around your food and beverage brand, go to firebellymarketing.com to learn more.
Thank you so much. We've been, Lisa, for coming today and sharing your time and your knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
Awesome. And you've been listening to another episode of the Firebelly Social Show, where we interview leaders and founders of mission-driven food and beverage brands. And it's something that we love, and that's our mission. So we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Firebelly Social Show. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.